All right, hi everybody. Welcome to Northern Now, the digital event series presented by NMU Alumni Relations for alumni and friends. My name is Kylie Bunting. I'm the digital engagement architect of Alumni Relations here at NMU, and I'm so glad that you have joined us for tonight's cooking segment. We're really excited to continue this series and to kick off the holiday season with some nostalgic recipes. But first, I just want to go over a couple of logistics, not music, just logistics. So while we are unable to see and hear you in this webinar format, we still want to hear from you. So Diane and I will be monitoring the Q&A section. So if you have any questions or comments for our chefs, feel free to share them there. You also can use the chat function at the bottom of your screen to chat with fellow alumni and friends who are tuning in. Please note in the chat window, there's a drop-down menu to send chats to hosts and panelists or to everyone. The default is hosts and panelists, so make sure before you send a message, you change that to everyone so you can chat with your fellow alumni who are tuning in as well. Northern Now will continue in 2023, so if you have any suggestions for topics or things you'd like to hear about, please let us know. We also are excited for 2 NMU Alumni Days in Detroit. First, we will be at Ford Field for the Lions versus Vikings game on December 11th. Then on March 18th, 2023, we will be at Little Caesars Arena for the Red Wings versus Avalanche game. So you can find more information on that, nmu.edu/alumni/events. And please join us if you'll be in the area or come take a trip over. It'll be a couple of really fun days. And also NMU Day of Giving is coming on November 29th. This year's theme celebrates the Northern Reach and encourages the NMU community to give back to where it all began, NMU. So you can give back to the department, program, or team that helped shape your own journey and support students along the way. You can find out more at nmu.edu/dayofgiving. I also just want to take a moment to mention Wildcats Connect, which is a platform for alumni and students to ask and offer advice. It's a great way to help out NMU students, stay connected to the university, and get in touch with your fellow alumni. You can visit our website for more information. And then also don't forget to keep in touch with us on social media. You can find all of this information and more on there. So now I would like to welcome our moderator, Diane Stone, who is a 2010 NMU grad and the current director of the Northern Center and Event Services. Welcome, Diane. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to introduce tonight's chefs and excited for them to show you some great recipes to cook for the holidays. First, I'd like to welcome Chef Alden McDonald, a 2010 NMU graduate and the Executive Chef of Dining Services at NMU. Chef Alden joined our team at the beginning of 2020 after years of experience in the industry, ranging from ice cream to baking to high-volume line cooking to teaching. She loves sharing her knowledge and experience to help folks feel more comfortable in the kitchen. And joining Chef Alden is Trixie McGurran-Jacobson, a current student of the Hospitality Management program at NMU. Trixie is in her 3rd year of the program and is the Vice President and Treasurer of Hospitality Club on campus, as well as an active member of the American Culinary Federation. In addition to being a student, she is currently working as a student lead and kitchen assistant for Northern Center Catering. While she plans on continuing her education through experience after college, she hopes to have her own business in the future and gain her certifications. Welcome, Chef Alden and Trixie.
Thank you so much, everyone. We are going to start with Trixie tonight, but real quick to explain kind of what we're doing today and the inspiration for our dishes is we picked dishes that were very nostalgic for us individually, and we'll each explain that as we go. Specifically things that helped inspire our culinary journey since we're in this beautiful new space, and Trixie's going to talk about that in a few minutes. We really wanted to pick dishes that meant something to us personally, but also dishes that you could make at home and kind of zhuzh up your table during the holiday season. So Trixie, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, of course. Today I'm going to be showing you how to do a wild mushroom soup. I picked this because this was one of my courses for professional cooking too. I took this during the year of COVID. So my assignment was to create 3 courses, and then we had to present them to a couple professionals and a couple people in the hospitality program. And this was my first course. I love as you know from last time, mushrooms are one of my favorite things, and I feel like this is a great addition, especially if you have any allergen restrictive guests attending your dinner, because this dish is dairy free as well as vegan. I do use gluten in this dish, but that can easily be substituted. We are focusing today on this wild mushroom, oyster mushroom. Oyster mushroom comes in these crazy cluster-like forms. And what I did was I pulled it apart to make these kind of strips. And that's all you really need to do to prep the oyster mushroom. And then you keep them in these long strips, and that gives a difference in texture when you're eating the soup. I also have some classic mushrooms here, just to make it a little more accessible. It is the winter time, but feel free to use any type of mushrooms that you can find around. These are the 2 that I choose. That doesn't mean that you have to choose those for your dinner. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to heat up a stock pot. I have a pretty big stock pot here. This recipe will do about 5 to 6 portions, depending on how many you're serving. And we're just going to turn on the heat for this one. And we're going to start with a little oil to the bottom. Our first step is sauteing these onions and shallots as well with our mushrooms to kind of break everything down before we even start with the soup. While I'm letting that heat up, this is a great time to look at your recipe for the soakened cashew creme. We use soakened cashews instead of dairy to make this cream, and we use nutritional yeast to make it a little cheesy but without the cheese. I'm going to oil my pan, little liberty, and then I'm going to add my onions and shallots into the mix. I'm going to let these saute until they're about translucent, and then I'll be adding my mushrooms. And this will just take a couple minutes. I want to say that ProCook 2 was one of my favorite classes, a part of the program. It really brought on how I became a chef, or am becoming a chef. It really opened my eyes to the cooking world. It taught me a lot of different things that I never thought about before about cooking. I thought I came into the program thinking I was going to be a baker. And this completely changed, ProCook 2 completely changed my mentality on that. And so when I was designing these courses, I really went with a full kind of in the wild mentality. I followed up this soup with a braised rabbit on top of Jerusalem artichokes, which are these very tasty little nubs of root that you can saute, and they add a burst of flavor to anything any other rooted vegetable. I added that on top of wild rice with a little bit of the braised liquid. And then I finished that with an advanced s'more, I called it, but it was really a broken down s'more. I made a honey cinnamon graham cracker. I topped that with aquafaba mousse, which is the liquid from chickpeas. And then I added on my own homemade marshmallow, left it in the broil for a couple seconds, and then I pulled it out and it was beautiful. And that just put my whole world together for what I wanted to be in the culinary world. I love using wild ingredients. I love bringing it back home to the nature and what we started from. And that's why I went with this dish.
Who was your professor when you were ProCook 2?
My professor was Derek Estes, and he's the operational manager of catering. And ProCook 2 is actually the time when he brought me in to catering.
Yeah.
And I'm very grateful for that.
Yes, and for those of you who have watched our series before, Derek has been on here before and is fabulous at this as well, and does a great job showing us different dishes. He has a particular passion. And so would you say that Derek is probably one of your mentors while you're here in the program?
I would say so. He has taught me most of what I know. He has given me a lot of insight into the culinary world. He brought me into ACF, and now he's the co-advisor for the hospitality club. It's really been great to have him along as a team member and as a boss.
Yeah.
and every aspect of the culinary world.
And so let's talk a little bit about the ACF. I bet some people don't know what that is.
Oh, that's true. The ACF is the American Culinary Federation. It's countrywide, but each state has their own kind of chapter. They're kind of sectioned off. The UP is one of the largest chapters in the US because it is the whole UP, which can make meetings kind of difficult, especially in the winter. But it really brings chefs, culinarians, foodies all together into one location, and we do different events. Since we just did the OSF Heart of Gold dinner,
Yep.
and that donated money to cancer research. That was 7 courses, all paired with wine. It was beautiful, and I had the luxury of being able to join with the president of the hospitality club, Aaron Turner, to do the dessert course. And that was just a fantastic time.
And it was beautiful. They did a phenomenal job. But I can tell you that the American Culinary Federation is one of those things that I got into because of Chris Kibbitt, who is one of the chef professors here in this program as well. And as you can see, we're in this beautiful facility. It's gorgeous. And Tracy's going to talk about that in a few minutes. But that's kind of where we're at right now when we're talking about these recipes specifically is how they influence us as culinarians, how they bring inspiration to us, how they've influenced even like the ingredients that we use. Because I can tell you stories of how experiences have permeated my entire culinary experience. And I tend to lean on certain flavor combinations because that's where my comfort lies. Is a good way to put it, because they bring back comfortable feelings for me as a chef and as a person. So as Trixie's doing this, do you want to talk about anything else about the program or inspiration that you find? Anything else that you want to tell us about that?
I really derive a lot of my inspiration from a lot of the cookbooks that I've gathered throughout the years. I've made a collection about 35 cookbooks, and I love them all. One of my favorite is Chef Allen. He's called the Forager Chef. If you look him on online, he has his own blog, and he's amazing. He comes up with amazing dishes that are all foraged on himself, and he has such an insight to the world of foraging. I'm going to take a moment here, and I'm going to talk about my next step. What I've done now is I have the mushrooms, and they're sauteing. I've added a little oil, salt, and pepper. I'm starting to season them a little bit and break them down. We have some fresh thyme here that I also be using, as well as some fresh nutmeg. Nutmeg, when it's used fresh, it comes into this form. Excuse me for a second. Those stoves are crazy.
They are very good.
So these fresh nutmeg, they come in these little pods. And what you do with fresh nutmeg is you use kind of a zester, and then you zest it on top of the ingredient that you're using. Now, fresh nutmeg is very powerful compared to your ground nutmeg. So I'm only going to use a little bit. I do have measurements out on your recipe. But when you're using fresh nutmeg, it's really to taste. It's really to see what flavor level you want to get at for your recipe. I'm also going to be adding a little fresh thyme in here. I'll also be adding this later when we create our roux, but I want to season the mushrooms. I'm seasoning at every step to make sure my dish is fully flavored when it's done. So we're just going to use some fresh thyme, and I'm just going to sprinkle this onto my mushrooms. Now, these mushrooms don't have to be fully cooked. What we're going to do is we're kind of just breaking them down until the point where we can bring them back into the soup. So once these are broken down, I will be taking them out of the pot, and then I will be starting my roux, which will be a couple more minutes. Yes. I will also be adding my garlic at this time as another flavoring. I say 2 to 3 cloves, but that's your choice, whatever you go with. Some people measure garlic by the heart.
Why do we put our garlic in later, Trixie?
I add my garlic in later because I don't want it to burn. Garlic has a tendency to burn a lot, and I want to avoid that, especially because this will also be used later into the soup. And I really want to extract all the flavors from the garlic without losing it right when it hits the pan and during the saute.
Absolutely. Do we have any questions yet, Diane?
Not yet, but I have a question. So where do you find the variety of mushrooms? I know you forage, but if you were to want to buy them locally or in the supermarket, when I go, I know that there isn't quite the variety that you've chosen. So can you give some examples of where you can pick up those varieties?
Yeah, of course. There's a couple great local area farmers, mushroom farmers in the area. Toledo Farms is very common. You can find them a lot at the co-op. But there's also a lot of great ones that come out during the farmers market. I can't remember the name right now, but they sell great king oyster mushrooms.
I think of the UP Gourmet.
Yes, UP Gourmet.
UP Gourmet is very good.
They sell some great king oyster mushrooms, which are these very thick mushrooms that can be cut and fried. I like to make vegan scallops with them and butter baste them.
So good.
They also have a great lion's mane that comes through, but you can also get dried. If you can't get the fresh variety, dried is always okay. You just have to let them soak for about 30 minutes in varying liquids. I've used sherry vinegar before to soak them. I've used broth. And then I use them in place of the fresh mushrooms. Sometimes they need a little more if it's dried, just because they do lose a lot of their liquid. But it's an easy replacement, and sometimes it's easier on a budget.
Yep, for sure.
Thank you.
Especially in those off-season times,
Mhm.
especially up here. Sometimes getting dried is better than trying to find fresh, and paying astronomical amounts for fresh when the dry with the flavor would be just as good and a lot less expensive. So yeah.
So now my mushrooms are pretty much at the saute level that I feel is appropriate for the next step. I'm going to deglaze my pan with a little bit of white wine. This also kind of adds more flavor, a little more depth to the soup, but the deglazing also helps bring up some of those brown bits that are left behind from sauteing and brings them to the surface. So I'm just going to deglaze this. I would also like to say to make sure that when you are using white wine, don't pour directly from the bottle, put it in something else, and then pour it into your pan. This just prevents any accidents from happening.
Accidents. Sometimes your wine likes to catch on fire if you're flaming too high. That's happened before.
So now I've got my mushrooms, they're deglazed. I'm going to take them off the heat. And it's okay, I'm going to leave some of that liquid in there as well. This is a heavy pan. Putting this right back in my bowl so we can start our roux. The roux is basically our thickening agent in this soup. The roux provides kind of the stabilizer and gives it that consistency that we're looking for in this soup, which is kind of a little like bisque-like, that to give some imagery. So I've got my mushrooms out. I'm gonna let them cool, and I'm gonna start melting down my butter. This is dairy-free butter. Flora is one of my favorites, but there's some Country Crock that they're starting to do, some almond oil, olive oil varieties. Roux are 1-to-1, so you want 1 liquid to your flour base. And like I said, this can easily be subbed with a gluten-free flour. I'm using all-purpose, but I'm going to melt down my butter along with everything else that's kind of been left in here. I'm going to let that come down, and then I can add my flour.
Trixie, can a consumer use a cashew cream instead, like a ready-made cashew cream, rather than making it from scratch
Of
with
course.
this recipe?
Yeah, and you don't
Okay.
have to use cashew cream. If you wanted to use a dairy substitute, that is okay as well. I like the cashew cream just to give it completely dairy-free, but I feel like it provides a little nuttiness and cheesiness to the dish, especially when it's mixed in, and it blends really nice with the mushrooms.
I mean,
Okay,
if
I
someone
do
has
have another question.
Great.
Sorry, Alden.
That's fine, go ahead.
What made you decide to go to NMU?
What made me decide to go to NMU?
Yeah.
Well, my brother originally went to NMU, and we would always vacation in the UP. And I saw NMU campus. I talked to Logan Glendenning, another great mentor in my culinary path. And I just fell in love with the program. I love the hands-on applicants to it. Some programs can be a lot of book work, and I enjoy the hands-on aspect. I'm not a sitting down at the desk type of person. I loved seeing the cafe. I saw it when it was the Jacob Betty, and I just thought it was amazing. And so I went here. I checked out other places such as Sullivan in Kentucky, but the UP is beautiful, and Logan just really brought me in. I'm also adding some thyme to my roux to kind of season it a little bit before I add anything else. When I'm stirring my roux, I'm kind of looking for a slight tannish color. We are cooking it down to kind of bring it to cook out the flour, but also to make it more pliable for when we add our broth in. I'm gonna add,
Sorry,
go ahead.
one of our guests want to know, they see like using wild ingredients. Do you use some wild ingredients in your desserts as well?
When you did your dessert, did you do anything wild in
Do you do anything wild in your dessert?
I didn't do anything super crazy. I mean, already making my own mushrooms was a little interesting, but I mean, already making my own marshmallows was interesting. But I made this aquafaba mousse, which is the liquid from chickpeas, and it was delicious. If you ever have the chance, save that chickpea water, use it for a mousse, use it for something. It's vegan and it's delicious. I made a dark chocolate mousse, and I still make it for friends and family when they come up. So what I've done now is I've slowly added in my broth. I've used a mushroom broth, but you don't have to use a mushroom broth. You can use a veg broth, a beef broth, whatever you have available. And I've added that into my pot. And then I'm also going to add back in my mushrooms. And I'm going to add that right back in there.
One little tip about roux, in case for anyone who is, very curious about roux, is there's a couple things. Is that roux is some form of fat and some form, flour, so a starch. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be butter, even though we're taught that it has to be butter. It doesn't. It can be oil or a dairy-free butter. And always use the hot cold, meaning if you have hot roux, add cold stock. And if you have cold roux, add it to hot stock and then whisk vigorously. And that way you will almost guarantee that you don't have lumps. Now, like I said, almost guarantee, but that's a great way to help prevent any sort of little lumps of flour of that roux, is if you whisk that cold stock into that hot roux. So just a couple little tips about roux. And the longer you cook it, the less it will thicken your soup or sauce or whatever you're doing. So if you're making a roux that's really dark and nutty, just remember you're probably going to need more roux in whatever you're making. If you're making a sauce like a gumbo or something like that, that calls for a dark roux. So just be aware of that.
Okay. So we have our mushrooms back into our broth. We're going to let that simmer for about 15-20 minutes, just to let everything kind of thicken up, let some of that broth evaporate. In the meantime, I'm going to come back to the cashew cream. As it says in your recipe, cashew cream needs soak-in cashews. It allows everything to break down easier. We also have the nutritional yeast. And then we add a little bit of apple cider vinegar for some saltiness, as well as some oat milk. You don't have to use oat milk. You can use any dairy-free milk that you prefer, or even just the water from the cashews. And I blended that up to this consistency. And as you can see, it's kind of this creamy consistency that we will add on to our final plate. You can use it for decorations, but when you finally serve it, tell your guests to stir it into the soup. Adds that cheesiness flavor all throughout. And this will kind of sit in the fridge and keep this consistency for a while, but it only lasts for about a week.
Can you substitute the nutritional yeast with something else?
I know we're both going. I mean, you could use, there are some vegan alternatives to like Worcestershire sauce that would give you that same kind of nutty umami flavor. When someone's eating without dairy or meat in their lives, a lot of times they miss that. It's called umami, which is like that meaty, nutty flavor that you get from, say, like braised meats, like heavily roasted vegetables. So there's a product called Yondu, like, you know, Guardians of the Galaxy. It's not affiliated, but that's what it's called. It's called Yondu. And it does a great job of adding that savory nuttiness, but it's actually a soy-based product. So it's not nutritional yeast, but it's really nice. And it'll add that component. You could go with, I mean, if you eat fish, you go with a fish sauce that would help. You could go with a Worcestershire, but that also has fish in it. Just so people don't realize that, but it does.
Or you could just leave it plain and just have the cashew and
There you
nuttiness taste.
There you go.
You'll be missing out on that cheesy aspect, but if you can handle dairy, just shred some parm on top.
There you go.
Okay.
Or you could just go with like a little garlic and onion in there, a little sauteed garlic and onion, or even a little garlic and onion powder, and mix that in, and that would help as well, give you that sort of savory aspect that you're looking for.
Can you use Parmesan instead of nutritional yeast?
For sure.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
I'm all waiting for
Okay.
the next step. I can go on.
Great.
now.
Yeah. So first, before I want to talk a little bit about the space,
Oh,
Trixie.
of course.
So tell us about, if you notice, anyone who's seen us before on here and seen me with other guests, that we have, we're usually in the catering kitchen, which is still a great, beautiful functioning kitchen, but it's not as fancy and shiny as this one. So this is the new HM kitchen. So Trixie, why don't you tell us a little bit about the space, maybe a little bit about some new aspects that get you really excited about working in this space, and maybe some improvements that you see in your learning environment now that you're in this beautiful new space.
Of course. This new space is amazing. First of all, it's all open. As you can see, it kind of goes all the way to the back. There's a kind of a viewing station right there. You can see in the back by those fridges. This is kind of an area for people to present their dishes, do demos like we are now. And so the rest of the class can view. But you will also notice that there's individual stations this time. We didn't have this at the Jacob Eddy. We just had a bunch of tables and you were fighting for spots with everybody else. Back there, we also have this giant fridge, which is also an amazing plus. We can have a lot more ingredients, and it's in a way easier spot. And the door is closed this time, which is awesome. We also have a great big stand mixer, which is also very nice to see. This will be great for the artisan bread class and whatnot. There's a new edition of the tilt skillet, which will be an amazing thing to learn and how to work with, especially if we're in a bigger capacity kitchen. The tilt skillet is a necessity. You won't be able to see it here, but the restaurant is right down the hallway, clear cut. It's beautiful. It's very modern, open kitchen, so guests can see what we're doing when we're cooking. Pro Cook 2 usually takes over the restaurant, as well as if we have any other events. We had an open house in there the other day, and everyone got to witness and see the brand new space. And just the new equipment is always nice. I love new equipment. Anything shiny is always nice. But the new equipment and the updated space will give a whole lot of variety to what we can do for classes and what we can do for the program here. I know we have high school students that come in and they're seeing the new space and they're getting excited. And this is just a great stretch for the program to go for. Because will be nice to see new students come in and experience this.
Absolutely. And selfishly, I can say that this is not selfishly, but for the area, this is a really great space as well, because this can be utilized for things like culinary competitions, certification exams, like the local ACF chapter is hosting a certification exam this Sunday, and we're able to really do that effectively in this new space, which is amazing. So it benefits the community as well. So we're really excited to be in here. So I'm going to talk a little bit, I'm going to take it over while Trixie's soup is working. And I'm going to talk a little bit about a couple recipes that are near and dear to my heart, things that bring me inspiration and have shaped kind of who I am as a culinarian, that we're in this space of learning. I graduated from the HM program in 2010, and I was a non-traditional student, so it's kind of mid-career for me. But I had people in my life that really helped shape the foundation of who I am as a chef. Deb Pierce and Chris Kibbitt, Yvonne Lee, like all three of those were huge influences on me while I was in school here. But the first thing I'm going to do actually goes back to when I was 17. I was an exchange student in Thailand, and I was just this girl from the Midwest, from Michigan, and I flew as far away from home as I could without coming back. And I lived in Thailand for a year, and that was the first time that I'd really had those you know, if you ever watch Ratatouille and like he's taking a bite and there's all the colors and everything, that was like the first time I'd had one of those moments in my life where I ate something and all the flavors and the bite builds on it, and you have this whole crescendo, and then there's a whole science behind it, which I will not bore you about. But the reason that matters is those foods and those flavors have influenced me my entire career, because it woke up a curiosity about food, where it comes from, how it influences culture, and how it influences us as people and community. And that's where I started that curiosity in food, was when I was living in Thailand. So one thing that I love to get whenever I go to a Thai restaurant is Thai iced tea. And if anyone's had it, it has a very signature color. It's kind of orange. It's really fun because it's kind of interactive. You mix it up. And so it's actually a lot easier to make at home than people realize. And it's all things that you can find at your local grocery store or even on your shelf, which is really cool too. So I have some loose leaf tea I got from the co-op, and it is a Thai black tea. It's always important, if you're going to have it authentic, that it's black tea. And I'm just going to put that in my pot here. I have a little bit of cinnamon, just a cinnamon stick. I have some star anise. Ooh, there we go, star anise. I have 2 of those little pods I'm putting in there, yummy. And I have 2 green cardamom pods. And if anyone's worked with cardamom, you know that a little bit goes a long way. So you don't need any more than that. Now, the ingredient that some of you are going to go, what about, is turmeric. Yes, I love turmeric. It's delicious, and it helps. It's what gives this drink its signature color. A couple teaspoons of turmeric, and it goes great with these flavors. That's what people don't, sometimes they're like, wait, no. And I'm like, yes, that's what you want. And I'm just going to pour 4 cups of water over this. And I'm going to put this on to boil. Trixie, I'm going to, if you could just turn that on for me.
Of course.
And that's just going to come to a boil. I like my tea very strong. And so I will bring that to a boil. I'll pull it off, and I'll actually let it steep for about 5 minutes. There are some hardcore tea people out there probably cringing at me right now because I said that, but I said what I said. All right. So then this is what it looks like when it's done. It's kind of yellowish, like interesting. Now you can buy mixes. There's plenty of mixes in the world for Thai iced tea, and those are okay, but they're like artificially orange. This is the natural color that it looks like when you brew it from scratch. And I'm not into all those artificial colors. Then it's an iced tea. So we're just going to put some ice in a glass. Be liberal. It's iced tea. It's one thing I learned from the South. It's iced tea, which means there should be a lot of ice in it. And then we're going to take this, you kind of swirl it because the turmeric will settle in the bottom. And we're going to pour this, but we're only going to pour it about halfway. Let's do a smidge more. There we go. Then I have this other pitcher here. And this is a mixture of sweetened condensed milk and evaporated milk. Now, in the recipe that we have to disseminate, there's some sugar. I don't like things to be overly sweet, so I actually omit that sugar. If you're looking to have a sweeter tea, you're actually going to add that sugar to your pot when you make your tea. I left it out because, like I said, I don't really like overly sweet things. And the sweetened condensed milk has quite a bit of sugar. I'm just going to pour this slowly over the top like that. Ooh, and look how good that looks. Ooh, yum. And this is how you would serve it to your guest. And then they get to stir it up. I'm just gonna stir it up.
It's beautiful color.
Yeah. Oops, I'm making a mess. Surprise, surprise. And there you go. You can serve that with a straw. You can just drink it like this. I mean, it's delicious. Now, I was told by someone, they were a little bummed because I usually have a drink, an adult beverage on here. And I went with a Thai iced tea this time. I can tell you, this is a total adulteration, but this would be very tasty with rum. Just saying, a little splash of rum in there would be really nice. And it would like adult up your thing. What's nice about this too, is if you serve this to your guests, especially during the holiday season, they're gonna be like, ooh, but it's comfortable enough and approachable enough where it's not too far out there. But yeah, there's your Thai iced tea. It's absolutely delicious. And I'm gonna tell you, after we get off of here, I'm drinking that. All right, how's your soup going?
It's going great.
Great.
We're starting to get that consistency now. I'd give it another couple minutes. But this is all preference. If you like a little bit of a watery soup, you can take it off about the 10-minute mark. But I'm looking for a little more of a creaminess based soup. So I'm gonna leave it on there for another couple minutes.
Okay. So the next thing I'm going to talk to you about is gravlax. So salt cured salmon is one of my favorite things to eat in the whole wide world. I love it. It's delicious. It's buttery. It's smooth. And there's a whole reason behind it, of course, because I'm very nostalgic and I like reasons for things. And so when I was a kid, I have an aunt and I had an uncle who lived out in the Seattle area out in Washington. And at Christmas time, when I was a little kid, they sent us a package that had a bunch of those like fancy candies, like the strawberry candies that are wrapped in wrappers that look like strawberries with like the juice inside of them, and like the fancy gummy candies that taste like apricots, But one of the things they had in the package was a side of cured smoked salmon. And we got to break it out and eat it like on Christmas morning. And I remember eating that as a little kid. And that memory is so firmly sunk in my brain that now every time I eat this, I'm like transported back to being a little kid and thinking about it. So when I got older and became a chef, I was like, I want to learn how to make this. And actually, it's really easy to do. It's something that is a treat that you can offer guests, and you will pay literally half the price to do it on your own. And it takes only about a day and a half to do. And that's what people don't realize. It's actually very approachable and doesn't take a ton of time. So I have a side of salmon. You can pick it up. A couple things to be aware of is things that I hear sometimes. I forgot, I have another step first, is people say, well, chef, I can't afford to buy a whole side of salmon. Well, this is about 2.5 pounds. So it's not too crazy and it's a holiday treat. But if you can't, you can get a few fillets. Just note that your cure time is going to be a lot less. You're going to break that. It'll be 6, 8, 12 hours instead of say 24, 36 hours. So just be aware of that. Also, some people like a firmer salmon. I like a really soft salmon. So I only cured mine for about 24 hours because I used kosher salt. And some people like a harder salmon or cured salmon. You just leave it in the cure longer. That's all. And you kind of find your groove where you like it. I have sugar and salt, equal parts. I use kosher salt. Do not use iodized salt. The reason we don't want to use iodized salt or anything else that has a bunch of other minerals is because it will affect the flavor and possibly the color of your salmon. So that's why it's important to use a pure rock salt or like a kosher salt. So just be aware of that. You don't want to use a super fine salt because the salt permeates the flesh. And if it's super fine or a super fine sugar, then it'll permeate the flesh faster than say your salt, and then it'll throw your flavor balance off. So the dill here is fresh. You can use dried, just use a whole heck of a lot less of your dried because obviously it's going to be a lot more potent once it starts to rehydrate. And I am literally just cutting it. You don't have to fancy chop it. I just cut it up. And yes, I use the stems. Waste not, want not. I'm not eating the stems, but they have tons of lovely flavor. If you have a wonderful mother like mine who has a huge garden, then you are going to steal your dill from them. Then the last thing I'm going to do with this cure, I have some white peppercorns. The reason white peppercorns are important is because the other peppercorns can discolor the flesh of the fish, and then it'll look like you have little kind of pock marks on your side of salmon, that doesn't look good. And all I'm doing is just breaking this up in my mortar and pestle, partly because it just looks cool.
Chef, when you say equal parts, do you mean by weight or volume?
I just do by volume because salt and sugar are very similar in mass. So I just do it like, a cup of each.
All right.
You can do it by weight if you wanted to be really, really, really scientific, but I can tell you right now, I've never had an issue with just doing equal parts because they're so similar in mass. Equal parts volume. There we go. Just break those up. Doesn't have to be perfect. That's gonna go in there. Now I have my cure mix with my different components. There she is. I'm gonna mix that up. And I'm just gonna put some of this salt down. And this is plastic wrap that I already pre-loaded into my pan. I'm gonna put the skin side down like this. And you just wanna make sure that salt is all underneath every aspect of that fillet. So if you have to pick up the edges a little, spread it out, just, there we go. Then the rest of it, it's no real scientific thing. And I'm going to spread this out to make sure it's even, like this. Then I wrap it, bring it around. And then, I just do this, honestly. And then I'll put a weight on top. I'll take this ice out later, but I'll put a weight on here so it sits down. If you're at home and you don't have a pan this big, that's okay. You can use a smaller pan, but you're going to want to use like a baking dish or something. If you have to cut the fillet in half to fit, that's fine. Just make sure your pieces are relatively the same size. And remember, that'll cut down your cure time slightly if you cut it up into smaller pieces. And then you want it to be weighted. Then you let it sit weighted under refrigeration for about 12 hours. Then you flip it, put it back under refrigeration for about 12 hours, and that's when you're going to start to check it. If you're using kosher salt, it's usually done by then. And Magic of TV, I actually have one that's done. There we go. We're going to unwrap this so you can see it. And wear gloves. Invest in some gloves. Gloves are good.
Can
Wear
you
gloves.
remove the skin, Chef? Can you
What's
remove the
that?
Skin? Can you
Yep.
remove the skin?
You don't, if you get fillets that don't have skin on them, that's fine. But for service, it's easier if you actually leave, and for curing, it's easier if you leave the skin on for this. So this is what it's going to look like. See how it's super pink? That's not just TV, folks. That's really what it looks like. And your here will be firmer than your center. That's totally normal. And that's because the flesh is thicker here. Okay. And then here. And then it's done. And it just depends on taste. You want it to be firm like a medium rare steak or a medium steak, a medium. And so, this does actually work, by the way. People tell you about this. Have you ever heard of this? Where it's like rare, medium rare. That really works. So this is like a medium rare to a medium feel. And you want to make sure you're using either a super fresh salmon or a sashimi grade salmon. And it'll say it on the package if it's sashimi grade. And the reason why is because you are curing salmon that is from raw. And although it's safe, you are curing raw salmon. So make sure that if it's the grade that you can eat raw. That's why it's sashimi. That's what that means. Then you want to look like a total boss. Put it on your platter here. And so what I did with this, and this is what it looks like when it's done, is I trimmed the belly off so it has a nice shape. Because you're going to have a little flap on the end that's kind of like the belly part that's really thin. I just trimmed that off. I whipped some cream cheese. These are eggs. This is very traditional gravlax platter. I always say there's not much that stays true through from the 1980s and 90s, but all this. So some fresh dill. I have some mustard, capers, and then some crackers. And I can tell you that this right here, you put this down at a holiday party and everyone's going to love you. So the taste, it's buttery and smooth. That's what you're looking for. It's going to be a little salty and a little sweet. That dill should really come through because it like sat on there and soaked in. And yeah, and then the belly piece, I always just eat in the kitchen. You know, it's like the person who's carving the turkey sneaks the bite. The person who makes the gravlax gets to get the belly. So, and that is your beautifully cured salt and sugar cured salmon. And it really is that easy. Do we have any questions about it? I'm not hearing any. Okay. Well,
I have one question
lovely.
about how many people would that feed? I mean, how much did you make, say, for 20 people? Will that feed 20 people?
If it's with a lot of other things, then yes.
Okay. All right.
I would say that that's probably a 12 to 15 person.
Okay.
And then if you're serving with a bunch of other stuff, then yeah, you could get away with 20 for sure.
Okay.
And it depends on people's likes. You know, some people get a little nervous about it. They're like, but it's not cooked. I'm like, well, I mean, technically, but neither are raw carrots, but we eat those. All right. Any other questions for me? Because it looks like Trixie's about ready. And you can kill the tea.
Already done.
Perfect.
All right, so I got my little bowl here. We're going with this kind of big rimmed bowl. I really want to emphasize the mushrooms when that's presented to the guest. The mushroom soup has been going on for about 10-15 minutes, and it's kind of coming to the consistency I'm looking for. So I'm going to take a little scoop here. Really want to get those mushrooms in there.
That looks amazing.
Thank you. All right, so we have the soup here. We're gonna top it off with a little bit of our cream. Now this is per guest, but I like a little bit of cream in mine, so I'm gonna add a little drop. Just a tad. I put about 2 ounces on your recipe, but it's really per guest. And I'm gonna finish this off with a little bit of fresh thyme. Just keep it simple. There's elegance in the mushrooms, and that's all we're trying to focus on here. I'm gonna put a little fresh thyme on there and a little sprig of fresh nutmeg on there as well. And that's pretty much it. You are all done and you are ready to impress some people. I'm telling you what.
I feel like this
Hey,
would be
Trixie, if you wanted to add a bean to that, what would be, I mean, it's beautiful with just the mushrooms. I have a question from a guest that was wondering if you could add beans to that, like a mung bean.
Great.
What are your thoughts about that?
Great Northern white beans are usually my go-to.
Yeah.
They really take in flavor well, and their texture is not, some people get a little too freaked out by bean texture. They blend in really well. I usually keep a couple cans in my pantry, and when I feel like a veggie dish, but I need some protein in there, beans are my go-to. However, mushrooms do have a lot of protein in them. They're one of the highest protein-based vegetables. But if you were to go with beans, Great Northern, or even a butter bean might be nice.
Oh yeah, butter beans would be really nice.
Is this your favorite meal to make at home?
Honestly, my favorite meal to make at home, I have one of those Korean hot pots that just go directly onto the stove with a little lid. And I like to make little ramens based on that. I kind of just see what's in the fridge, what I got going on, and I just make whatever, and I use whatever broth I have on hand, and I make my little ramen pot, and I'm good to go. Sometimes I'll do a little drizzle of egg in there, like an egg drop soup type. And it's a full meal and it's great on a college budget.
Right. All right. Alden, I have a guest that would like you to explain what a grated egg is.
Yeah, so grated egg is so a little actually that's funny you would ask because I was thinking about that today while I was grating the egg and realized that probably people don't do this at home. Is you take you know your crisscross cooling racks that you have that you put your cookies and stuff on, you literally just put that over a bowl and you push your egg through and then it chunks the egg up and it gets this perfect little texture that goes great on toast and that kind of stuff. And that's what I did. That's a grated egg. You push it through a grate.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I gotta say that Thai, as it's been brewing this entire time, it smells
Oh, it smells
amazing
so
in
good.
here.
The cinnamon and everything. I know I
Mhm.
was pulling this out of the cooler and I was like, oh, it smells so good. Because you can smell the cardamom and the cinnamon in there with that little star anise. Oh, so good. And the turmeric goes really well with that. And yeah, so good. Do we have any other questions for us this evening? We have a quiet crowd today.
Oh, yeah.
Looks like we have one. No question, but a guest has said, great job to you both. Your dishes look amazing.
Well,
Thank
great.
you.
Well, everyone have a safe and wonderful holiday, whichever holidays you celebrate.
Mm.
And we're so happy that we've been able to hopefully inspire you to do something a little different and something a little new. And I can't wait to try Trixie's mushroom soup personally. But I guess that means we're all done here and we're going to open that floor back up to Kylie if she needs to say any announcements.
Thank you.
Somebody did just ask how you keep your knives sharp, if you want to
Ooh.
answer that quickly.
Well, you can have the old honing steel. That's usually come in a lot of kits. And that's before every run, I'm always using the steel. But blocks are one that I usually do every month. I like to sharpen my knives on a block. There's three different grains to the block. There's coarse, medium, and fine. Sometimes it's just coarse and fine. But you start with coarse first at like a 45-degree angle. It's easier to show, but at a 45-degree angle, and you kind of go from end to end on the block. The block is rectangular. And from end to end, you go back and forth, or one side back and forth on each side, an even amount of times. And you continue this through each grain of the block until you're finished. And then I usually finish off with the honing steel. And then that's it. You're all ready to go.
So most of that is the same as what I do, but I learned that I sharpen mine a little differently than other people do. So at home, when I sharpen my knives on a block, it actually has to be sharp enough to be able to shave my arm. That's a sharp knife for me. I don't do that with my kitchen knives, just for the record. For my kitchen knives, I take a piece of paper like this, and I'll take my knife and just go like this. And if the knife cuts through the paper like easily, then it's sharp. If it doesn't, then it's not sharp enough. You can also tell that your knife's not sharp is if you can't cut tomatoes or green peppers without it catching a little on the skin, that means you need to sharpen your knife. I sharpen my knife at a sharper angle than a lot of other people do. Usually people recommend 20 to 30-degree angle on your knife. And I actually sharpen mine at about a 16-degree, which is pretty extreme angles. But the reason why is because my knives are so sharp that they could take appendages off. So, but I find that I can do my intricate cuts and all the stuff that I do with my knives a lot easier if my knives are insanely sharp. So that's how I like to keep them.
Sharper knife is a safer.
That's right. A sharp knife is a safe knife, and a falling knife does not have a handle. Don't try to catch it. Just let it go. I actually broke a knife the other day for the first time in years at my house. My knife named Baby took a spill, and I haven't had the heart to throw her away yet. But she was one of my very first knives I ever had when I was working at the Waldorf Astoria in the pantry area, and I did all these really tiny cuts. But what I do is every single time I use my knife, I use a steel. And Trixie mentioned that. That's really important. Do not buy a diamond steel unless you're very good at using one. Just use the regular round steel, because that'll knock those little barbs off that cause your knife to get dull. You can't really see them, but they're there. Always wipe your knife off after you've run it across a steel or a stone, because you're going to have microscopic metal dust. So make sure you're wiping that off. And then always making sure that you wash your knives by hand. When you put them in the dishwasher, the extreme heat and also the chemicals will cause your knives to dull much faster. And then I tell people, if you're at home and you are never going to use your knives in a commercial kitchen ever, buy a nice quality knife and one of those sharpeners. And I would only say that for folks who never intend to ever use their knives beyond just their own kitchen. If you're using your knives like we are, I would say never do that. Don't use a sharpener. You got to learn how to sharpen your knives on a block. So, yep.
Awesome. All right. On that note, thank you all very much. Thank you, Chef Alden, Trixie, and Diane for once again another amazing cooking segment. We really appreciate it. Thank you all for joining us. We look forward to continuing the series in 2023, and we hope that all of you will support NMU students for NMU Day of Giving on November 29th. You can find out more information on our website there. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media where you can find out everything that is going on. We'll also be sending out a short survey, so you can let us know topics you are interested in as well. And one winner from tonight's attendees will receive a free t-shirt, so keep an eye on your email tomorrow as well. If you have follow-up questions, feel free to email us at alumni@nmu.edu, and we can direct that where it needs to go. And then, yeah, keep up with us on social, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Happy holidays, everybody, and thank you for joining us.